Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Book Brood. By the time this gets posted, I don't know how long it will have been since we posted a video or filmed one even.
Years.
Yeah, could be. So anyway, welcome back, and we're gonna bring you a wrap up. Heidi's gonna bring you a wrap up. I've got a couple books to talk about in there too. So.
Hopefully we will have posted our July wrap-up,
yes,
which we filmed weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. That was our Booktubeathon wrap-up as well.
Oh my gosh, that was awesome.
And so we didn't even, and we actually kind of vlogged a little bit for that, and then gave up like 3/4 of the way through the week or something like that.
We fail at life.
So why don't you do like 5 books and then...
Are we going to address the fact that our background...
Oh yeah, we should talk about that. That was another reason why videos maybe weren't made. We can blame that too, right?
Yeah, totally.
So this is our library where we usually have done our filming, at least lately. The scenery's changed because we had some surprise water damage in here.
And had to remodel the entire room.
Yes. This room is actually my office too, so that threw my whole working arrangement off, and I've just been out of sorts ever since. So we've got it all remodeled now, and we did it all ourselves too. So yeah.
Aaron mostly.
Well, you did help. You did help. You did, some sanding and painting and all this important stuff. Yeah. So should we talk about books, or did we need to update on anything else? In life.
It has been months.
2 days, and all of our children will be in school.
All 2 of them. It's going to be amazing. Hopefully we'll have a little more time for reading and maybe filming.
Maybe
editing. I don't know.
Editing.
Okay, should we just jump into, what is this, August? August. So it's halfway through September now, but we are going to be filming our August wrap-up.
Your August wrap-up.
You read a couple of things?
A couple of things, yes. And I completely failed on a buddy read with Nicole over at Who Picked This Book. So go check her out. I know she read the book because she told me on Twitter. And she probably posted a video, and I've been slacking on BookTube as well. So I'm totally behind and not contributing to the community right now. So that's enough about that. Why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okay, so I have 11 things to talk about. Actually, I DNF'd something too, and I really want to talk about that. I want to rant about that.
Yeah.
I need to make a whole video about that. But the first thing I read is First Test by Tamara Pierce. This is book 1 in the Protector of the Small Quartet. I actually read book 2 also, but I don't have it with me. That's Paige. Both of these were really good. I read them as a child, and I'm going through and rereading all of Tamara Pierce's stuff and really enjoying, and they're holding up really well. I still really like them. I think this is my favorite quartet that she has, mostly because there's no magic in it, and I am one of the weird people who prefer their nights to be magicless. I don't know, lady nights are enough of a thing without having magic in there. Anyway, so I read the first 2. The first one I gave 4 stars, and the second one I gave 5 stars.
Are these all, can I see the spine of this?
No, these are, they're not the Alana. Yeah.
Okay.
The Song of the Lioness Quartet.
Go ahead and do some more of them. Yeah, I'll jump in when I feel like it.
I listened to The Dirty Life on Farming, Food, and Love by Kristen Kimball on audiobook, and I really enjoyed this. This was about a woman from New York who falls in love with this farmer and decides to move out to a bunch of acreage that has no house, no electricity, no water, and they decide to make this self-sustaining farm, and she's completely out of her element, and it's a really hard first couple of years, but over that time she's learning to love this guy that she practically just met, and also learning how to farm and learning how to survive without fast food and conveniences and stuff. and it was really interesting. I enjoyed it.
I remember you talking about that while you were reading it. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like over a month ago. Yeah. I gave it 4 stars. I recommend it. It was on my Overdrive app, and if you have Overdrive, you should check it out. I finally finished the Cut and Run series. This is book 9, Crash and Burn, and oh my gosh, I loved it. It took me a long time because I wanted to savor it, you know. I didn't want it to end. Obviously, it's 5 stars. I love the series. I'm currently rereading the series because I just have to.
There was just nothing else for you to read.
No, there is, but like now that I've gone through, what is it, like 12 books with these characters, I wanted to go back and see if there was like any foreshadowing or any like more depth to the plot, you know?
Yeah.
Or if it was just, like, because the first time I was reading it, it felt like the author was just kind of making shit up as she went, you know? But I'm enjoying the reread. This is a 5-star read for me.
Right on. All right, I guess I'll talk about one. So I read A Star Tide Rising by David Brin. This is the second in the Uplift trilogy. And so this is a world where species uplift one another, or different species to sentience, and introduces them to galactic society. This takes place on a ship that is mostly dolphins, and then humans after that, and then there's one chimpanzee, intelligent chimpanzee, and all the dolphins are intelligent as well. So chimpanzees and dolphins are the species that humans have uplifted. This is about a ship that crashes, and they're being pursued by all these different hostile aliens, and they're trying to get the ship back in order. And then there's a bit of a coup that happens amongst the crew, things like that. And I gave it 2.5 stars.
That's not very good, huh?
It just wasn't all that interesting through it, and the characters, you never really attached to them. And I had a bit of a difficult time keeping them straight in the beginning. That could have been because I read it on audiobook. Check out Rachel over at Colonnati. She's read this series too. She'll have much smarter things to say about it. But yeah, female characters written simply to be there to pine over male characters, and it was another one on the list that's gone now.
Checking it off the list. It's an interesting concept.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And the author, David Brin, he wrote The Postman, which is that post-apocalyptic that happened in our area here.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that really proved that just because the setting was so familiar is what made me enjoy that book so much, and not so much
the writing.
Okay,
I read The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman and Chris Riddle, and I actually don't have the book because yesterday I tore it apart because I want to frame the artwork from this. The art is amazing, and unfortunately the story was not amazing. I thought it was really lackluster, and it felt like there was like stuff missing between pages, or like just things had been purposely left out, like every third sentence or whatever. Like you could have expanded and had like this novel, and instead it was like a maybe 35-page illustrated story, you know? But it was about Snow White after her whole, getting thrown in the coffin and then coming out. And then she comes out as a badass, and she becomes like this knight, and she wants to rescue other princesses or whatever.
Okay.
And so she goes and she hears about Sleeping Beauty, and she goes to try and rescue her. And there's a bunch of dwarves that are along for the ride, and the art is amazing, the story.
Okay, so just, yeah.
But because the art was so good, I gave it 4 stars. Okay, I read Station 11. I'm very proud of myself for finally getting to this one. I've owned this for over a year, maybe 2 years. Long time. This is by Emily St. John Mandel. And I listened to this on audiobook mostly. I went through and found some of the quotes that I wanted to tab up. I really enjoyed this. This was a post-apocalyptic, or like during the major event that causes societal collapse. It's this vicious form of bird flu or something that wipes out a huge portion of the population. And then it skips ahead 10 or 15 years, and then it follows some characters who are basically they're younger, so they don't really remember a lot of before the collapse, but just their life now. And those characters are part of this traveling troupe of Shakespearean actors, and they go from, settlement to settlement, and when everyone else is focused on just surviving, and they're trying to bring classical music and Shakespeare to people who've never heard of it before, basically.
Yeah.
And it had a lot of really interesting things to say, but it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. The main character I wasn't a huge fan of, and she was like obsessed with this movie star. But Hollywood, it's been like 15 years since there have been Hollywood stars, right? So I don't know. The main characters that this book followed, they were trying to weave them together to like show that everything's interconnected, and your past actions affect the future and everything like that. And I wasn't a huge fan of that, but I did really like especially the lead up to the collapse, and like as it's happening. That was pretty intense. And I ended up giving it 4 stars. Okay, I also listened to Wild, From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail by Cheryl Strayed, and I liked this so much more than I thought I was going to. So I saw the movie and I enjoyed it, but I liked the book so much better. I gave it 5 stars, and I highly recommend it. I thought it was well done, and especially since a large portion of this book goes through Oregon, which is where we live. I knew of a lot of the places like Crater Lake and all these places that she saw and she stopped at because the Pacific Crest goes through there, and I thought that was really interesting. I read Part and Parcel by Abigail Rue, and this was the last book in the Sidewinders series, which was the spin-off series to Cut and Run. So this was actually after Crash and Burn chronologically. So this was the last one. And I really liked it. It was the best out of the Sidewinder series because the first 2 weren't that great. I gave it 5 stars, and as much as I didn't want it to end, I thought that this one did a really good job tying things together.
Good.
I read Shadow of the Hegemon by Orson Scott Card. This is book 2 in the Bean series, the Shadow series that follows, Bean mostly. And this one I really enjoyed. I gave it 4 stars. I wasn't a huge fan of Peter, and that was most of the reason why I wanted to read this series, was I wanted to know like Peter's motivation, and he becomes Hegemon, and he orchestrates so much of the political side of Earth's politics goes crazy between when Ender leaves and by the time he gets to the colony. And I was trying to read these in chronological order, but I didn't really believe he was just such a whiny teenager, which I didn't appreciate.
Yeah.
No. And then after that one, I picked up Shadow of the Giant, and oh my gosh, I hit a point in that, I don't even know where it was, if it was like 25% or like 50% through, where,
Author's politics.
Yeah. So there was this huge long part, this scientist who like, it's very complicated if you haven't read the series, but I guess the geneticist who was in charge of like making Bean the way he is, Bean tracks him down, and this is a gay man, and he spends a huge long chapter convincing Bean that it doesn't matter who you are or what your sexual orientation is or whether you know, even if you're asexual, even if it doesn't matter who you are or what your life is like, everyone deep down inside really just wants to have babies, to have so many babies with someone of the opposite gender. And that's all life is good for. It's the only purpose that anyone has, and everyone needs to do it. And basically it was just a big giant book trying to convince Bean to have children, even though Bean was talking about how he has a fatal genetic condition. No, it was almost guaranteed that he would pass it on to any children, and he was trying to make the point that he does not want to do that. And everyone in the book was trying to convince him that he's just being ridiculous and he just needs to have all of the babies ever, all the time. And the main kicker of it was Bean was like, oh, okay, you're right. And this is supposed to be the most intelligent person on the planet, and you're just no.
Yeah.
He would not just roll over and be like, you know what, guys, you're right. I'm going to have all of the babies.
Completely based on appeals to emotion, right?
Yeah. No. So, basically, I DNF'd that book and the entire series because I've went in and looked at reviews, and people say the entire rest of the series is more of that and then the consequences of that book. So I have no desire to, this is the first time that I've run into the fact that Orson Scott Card's religious opinions are pushed on the reader so hard. I think that he was able to do such a great job with having religious characters and having secular characters and having, it be just this big thing of whatever, if you want to believe, that's great. If you don't want to, that's great. And just, much more like real life instead of just having the author himself preach at you.
Right, yeah. And I struggled with that just in reading his books, knowing how outspoken he is about his opinions about gender orientation and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, when I have read his books, I haven't read the series that you have, but I was always impressed with that as well, that someone with such personal opinions can actually still write a sci-fi that's interesting and that's, thought provoking and stuff, which it kind of surprised me too that Ender's Game was so good because you don't consider extremely orthodox people to be the most free thinking, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I read that short story where one of the main characters, if not the main character, was a kid who grew up in a very fundamental cult religion, and him trying to find the balance when he gets shipped off to battle school and trying to figure out what he believes and tone down the crazy extremism and really come to connect with other people and kind of adopt a more secular worldview. And so going straight from that to this, it was just I felt very betrayed, and I was like, no, I was enjoying this so much. I was going to binge the whole rest of... I had all of the audiobooks on my overdrive checked out. I was going to binge the entire rest of the series. And then I couldn't.
I hope you still do read Speaking for the Dead and Xenocide, though. Even if it takes you some time.
It might take... I feel betrayed.
No, I completely understand. So, I read Castle Hangnail by Ursula Vernon, and I read this to the children over a series of bedtimes, a long series of bedtimes. This is a 50-chapter book. But there's little illustrations throughout it, but it was really good for them. It was at their level enough. So this is about Castle Hangnail and the minions that reside in there, and the Board of Magic that essentially owns and manages the castle, at least on the back end, knows that they have not had a master for too long, and they're on their last extension to fill the slot of a master, or Castle Hangnail is going to be decommissioned. So Molly, the main character, shows up, and she is a middle school wicked witch, and it goes on to her adventures of trying to claim the castle and winning over the townsfolk, and it was great. There was just a lot of entertaining stuff in there, a lot of entertaining characters. I had, at least a bit of a voice for most of them by the end of it. Yeah.
You're good at that.
No, thank you.
I finished the Nailbiter series. This is volume 6, and it is the last one that has been published. And at the end, they're like, "The end?" Question mark. But I mean, it's so far it's the end. And then this is by, I can never remember, Joshua Williams and Mike Henderson. And I've really enjoyed this series. I want to get the full bind-up of the 6 issues at some point. I gave this one 4 stars. I wasn't a huge fan of how they ended it. I feel like it was kind of rushed. And they were trying to take the series in a different direction right at the end, which I didn't really appreciate. And it kind of it reminded me of, there was a movie with Angelina Jolie, and like she was pretended to be pregnant with her serial killer's baby, and then she killed him at the end.
Oh.
Do you remember?
I remember that movie. I don't remember what it was called.
I don't remember either, but like that ending
the early 2000s or
almost
something.
Exactly the ending of this. And so I was like, what? But I gave it 4 stars. Overall, I really enjoyed the series. And I reread And I Darken by Kirsten White. I listened to this on audiobook, and I'm really glad I did. I apparently was mispronouncing so many of the places and names. This was really enjoyable. Again, it was a 5-star read, again, which is not always the case. This is my favorite book of last year, and it's probably going to be one of my favorite books of this year too, because it was just as good.
Nice. BookTube, take note of that book. The majority of BookTube would super enjoy it.
Allie from Hardback Quarter just read it.
Oh, she did? Okay.
She read it.
It seems like such a... seems like it would be a hit with BookTube in general, or the bigger circles of BookTube.
It's very much a feminist, main character. The main character is so strong, female warrior, badass. I'm surprised that more people don't love it. Mm-hmm. But maybe more people, not a lot of people like the morally gray anti-hero like I do, and that is so my niche. Like, that's my favorite. Mm-hmm. And I also like grimdarks, and this isn't exactly a grimdark, but it is, it's a Vlad the Impaler story, so it has moments of being really vicious and bloody. Things I'm currently reading.
Go ahead, since you just talked about it.
Okay, and then I moved on to Now I Rise, which is the sequel to And I Darken, and I am, 65% maybe through this, and I am loving this so much. I don't know if I'm loving it more than the first one, but definitely equally loving this. This is going to be a 5-star read. And I just looked up when the release date is for the 3rd and final book. So excited. It is in spring of next year, so it's not one of those that I'm going to have to wait a decade for. Hopefully. Definitely loving this one.
And I was supposed to read this. This was my buddy read book, and it's Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. Again, I was reading this with Nicole over who picked this book. Go check her out. She'll be linked down below. I fell into a reading slump. Like, that's just what happened. Because this book is great. This book is hilarious. It's so British. I was actually tabbing.
I was going to say, where are all your tabs?
I took them all out because what I was tabbing was anything I found particularly clever or funny.
And it was like every page.
And it was every page. And so it's after a while, I was like, okay, well, this is just, just read this book if you want to know. And every page is great. And so, And that's the frustrating, I haven't finished it yet, and I feel like a patoot, but anyway, I'll be focusing on that, and then just, not trying to beat myself up over it. It's what it is. I'll just ride it out and come back to reading when it comes back to me.
Mm-hmm. There are seasons where you just aren't feeling it.
Mm-hmm. And just with everything in life, it seems like everything's been off kilter.
Yeah. All right, I'm just going to rush through this. Rereading Cut and Run because it's amazing. I'm reading this For Real by Alex Hall, which is a not horrible 50 Shades of Grey type of situation. I know, it's pretty much just erotica. And then, and then I am reading The Magicians by Lev Grossman. And I just tipped over the 50% mark on this one. I'm listening to it on audio. And I go back and forth every about 20% of this book. Like, I really love it, I really don't like it, and I really love it. Right now I'm in a really loving it sort of way, and I think I'm committed to at least reading the next one. I think it's a trilogy.
Good.
So, but it is like an adult fantasy magic sort of situation. I think George R.R. Martin blurbed it and said, The Magicians is to Harry Potter what a shot of whiskey is to tea, or something to that effect. Like, so, I mean, I'm enjoying it.
All right, thank you for sticking with us. This is probably going to be a long one, as usual, but we love you all. Give us some comments, likes, whatever. We'll see you next time.
Bye.